Good morning, and welcome to another Seize the Day. I kind of missed everybody. I was in South Carolina, and the first week and the second week there, all of our family came, so it was virtually impossible to find a spot where we had about 20 people, and everybody's getting up at different times. My granddaughter was there, and my niece, who has three little ones herself, they were all present. So there was a lot of commotion and kind of hard to find a place. But it was ungodly hot. Oh my gosh. It was the heat index a couple of days rose well above 100. So when I started coming back home and we were in I drive through Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and then up up into New York, and then into um, Vermont, and then over into New Hampshire. So I take a little bit longer of a way. Maybe it's about another 50 miles or so, but the drive is so much prettier. But I just woke up in Lancaster, and it was 79 degrees, bright, clear day. And I'm like, oh, yeah, this is what's awaiting me when I get home. So appreciate the sun, appreciate being on the ocean. But it was a lot of, it's just great to wake up this morning and not feel that intense humidity. But food was good. Just played about 3 or 4 games of golf, and so it's everything that a vacation should be, right? Eat more food than you should, and get a lot of activity with family and friends. So, but I'm glad I'm back, ready to start a new series with you, and trust that things are going well, and on your end as well. We're in a series called Show and Tell. It's from Psalm 130. Today, we're going to look at Psalm 139. But the show and tell really began with us taking a look at this whole passage from John chapter 4, where we looked at the story of the Samaritan woman. And in that story, we were, seeing how Jesus has begun to reveal more and more of who he is. And he does that in a context of a conversation with this Samaritan woman, someone who culturally was very different from the Jew, who was a woman, right? And it appears that she's had quite the past. Everything that you would see as being not you know uh, so much different from the disciples, and yet Jesus begins this conversation with this Samaritan woman and draws her in, and he begins to speak with her, and until finally he reveals to this woman that he is the Messiah that has been promised throughout the scriptures, that he is the one who has come and is going to be the bearer of life, and this abundant life, this life that he tells us in the scriptures, using the metaphor of living water, that it would quench the thirst of men. And this woman has a desire for this, right? We also knew from the story that the disciples weren't quite as inviting of this woman as well. In fact, when they show up, if you remember the context of the story, they arrive at this well in Sychar, which is in Samaria, at a well that was dug out by their forefather Jacob, centuries and centuries ago. And now, when they get there, the disciples go into the town to buy some food. Jesus remains, and that's when he got engaged with this woman who was at the who had come to the well at a weird time of the day. It's noon time, and she's alone. I mean, all three of these things just say something is not right about this picture. And as the story begins to unfold, she reveals a spiritual interest. And Jesus says, "Listen, I'd love to talk to you more about this. Why don't you go get your husband and come back?" And the woman says, "I have no husband." And Jesus then pauses and looks at her and says, "You're correct." He says, "You have no husband, but you had you've lived with five, and the man that you have now is not your husband. So here, Jesus is saying, listen, he knows a lot about her, but it never acted as an encumbrance. There wasn't an obstacle that Jesus did not overcome. What he really wanted to do was to reveal something about who he was, so that this woman would enjoy a fuller life. He says, listen, if you know me, if you know the one who's talking to you, I would give you living water. And so our personal experience of God um, will show us that nothing about us is ever hidden from him. And it reveals the measure of his love for us. Think about that for a moment. This fact should really astound us. God is the only one who knows us completely and still loves us perfectly. That's the theme of that I want to pick up with you this week as we look at Psalm 139. That that Jesus, filled with empathy, is just demonstrating what the Father has said to us way back in Psalm 139 through the psalm that David wrote. And if you've never really read this psalm, what I'd like to do this morning is I'd like to spend some time reading it with you, and then just highlighting for you this truth that God knows us so intimately, and his love for us is so perfect that you will find him to be a very present help in your time of need. He will be the one who enables you to look out at your world with a view, not that we're going to be so overwhelmed, but that we have one who will walk alongside us even in the most darkest of moments. I don't know whatever trials that you may be experiencing on this Monday, August the 4th. But whatever they are, rest assured that God is not far from them. From personal experiences, I'm sure from the experiences of many who are watching this morning, you understand, right? That God, even in the midst of sorrow, you can still rejoice in what he is doing in you and the perspective that he gives you of life in general. It keeps you firm and planted well in this world, so that you're not knocked to and fro, that you don't find your emotions just racing all over the place, but there is a centeredness about life because you have this perspective of who God is, and that he knows you, and that he walks with you. So what I'd like to do this morning is just read Psalm 139, and then we're going to spend the rest of this week talking about it, and I will begin to divulge some things for you here. All right. So Psalm 139. Why don't we just read it here together? It says, "O Lord, you have searched me, and you know me. You know when I sit down and when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar. You discern my going out and my lying down. You are familiar with all my ways. Before a word is on my tongue, you know it completely, O Lord. You hem me in, behind and before. You have laid your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too lofty for me to obtain. Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I go up to the heavens, you are there. If I make my bed in the depths, you are there. If I rise on the wings of the dawn, if I settle on the far side of the sea, even there your hand will guide me. Your right hand will hold me fast. If I say, surely the darkness will hide me and the light become night around me, even the darkness will not be dark to you. The night will shine like the day, for darkness is as light to you. For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful, and I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, When I was woven together in the depths of the earth, your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. How precious to me are your thoughts, O God. How vast is the sum of them. Were I to count them, they would outnumber the grains of sand. And when I awake, I'm still with you. And now there's this transition in the psalm, and we read the present ache, right, that exists for David and for all of us, really, who live in a broken world. It says, if only you would slay the wicked, O God. Away from me, you bloodthirsty men. They speak of you with evil intent. Your adversaries misuse your name. Do I not hate those who hate you, O Lord, and abhor those who rise up against you? I have nothing but hatred for them, and I count them my enemies. But search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there is any offensive way in me, and lead me in the way of understanding. What a powerful, powerful psalm. Our personal experience of God shows us how nothing about our lives is hidden from him and reveals the mind-blowing measure of his love for us. So this fact should really astound us, that God is the only one who knows us completely and still chooses to love us. Talk about empathy, right? He knows the deepest parts of us, even the parts that we try to hide. Now, this is a series, right, called Show and Tell. It's about making sure that we are developing an awareness of who God is so that it would inform the way in which we can share that with others around them. So it's a matter of, maybe to use another metaphor that the Bible uses, that we taste for ourselves and see that the Lord is good. And then we're able to share that with others, to let them know why we have this hope that lies within us. Now, we may not ever really know the audience quite as, the way the Lord knows them, even those closest to us. On my ride home with Cindy, we always listen to books on tape, and at one juncture we were listening to this book, and in the as the book was going on, it was revealing some things about the characters that seemed to be a surprise to those who heard it. And so we paused the book, and we said, we've been married now 43 years. So what are some things that would surprise you? And so we sat down and we just started talking a little bit. And I said, I don't really know that much about your high school days. Like, what was high school like for you? And I learned a bunch of things, about my wife. And she learned a bunch of things about me. I went to a high school that was an hour and a half away from my home. And because of that, I never really had an opportunity to engage in all of the traditional high school things that people do. I played football for the school, but where I played, like I said, I had to travel an hour and a half by public transportation to get to school. And then you would stay after school for practice. By the time I got home, it was usually somewhere around 6:30, 7 o'clock at night. And then I had homework to do. I went to school by myself, and I came home by myself, even though I went to a high school that had 8,400 boys. Our games were played all over the city of New York. So my brothers and sisters, they were, the youngest one is 5 years older than me. So my parents were both married before. So they had 3 each. And then when they got married, they had me and my brother Kenny, who is 5 years younger than I am. So even though I come from a large family, right, we had 6 boys and 2 girls, right? And I was one of the, I was one of the 6, but I was the firstborn of my parents' marriage. So it was like yours, mine's, and ours. But the older groups, they were already, like I said, the youngest one was just about 5 years older than me. And so by the time I got to high school, they were all out of the house, except for my younger brother, who was still in elementary school. So I wasn't hanging with him, and I left early in the morning, to go to school. So just talking with her, it just dawned on me that so much of my high school days really was spent alone, like going and coming. And because of that, I had to grow up pretty fast. And my wife's high school experience was totally different. She was on a debate team. She had a lot of friends. They all lived in the neighborhood. They were all gathered together. They go to school together, come home together. They had the prom. They did all those things. But my school was too far away, and so I never really took advantage of much of that. So I only say this because here I'm married to her for 43 years, and I'm learning new things sitting in the car with her. And this is someone that I've spent the last 43 years of my life with. So if we could do that with the people that we know the most intimately, it it should never really surprise us that we're never really going to understand everything that's behind a person's face. But isn't it something that when you look at this text and you begin to read it, you realize that God is now divulging himself in a way that says, I know everything about you. What the psalmist is claiming is that we can be sure that God knows all the details of the lives of those that we'll witness to, but also he knows everything about us. And we can be sure that anything that he reveals to us or to them is going to be for our benefit and for an opportunity for us to draw nearer to him. And so that's what this Psalm, 139 is really all about. And so I thought there are a number of attributes that we see being displayed here by God towards his people. And I thought, well, this might be a good way for us to really break down this psalm throughout this week. And we'll give some other examples along the way. But here's one. Why don't we just start here by looking at Psalm 139 and just look at the first 6 verses this morning again. It says, "O Lord, you have searched me and you know me. You know when I sit and when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar. You discern my going out and my lying down. You're familiar with all of my ways. Before a word is on my tongue, you know it completely, O Lord. You hem me in behind and before. You have laid your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too lofty for me to attain," right? So here is a passage that begins to underscore that God knows all about us. In theological terms, it talks about God's omniscience. Omni means all, right? And and so God is all knowing. And we'll see that there are other attributes that are being described in this psalm as well. But this first one is God's the ability to know all about us. He says, "You search me, you know me." Well, as I mentioned before, like who really does that? Like even your closest friends, do they really know everything that's going on behind his face? What makes you afraid? What brings on anxiety and fears? Sometimes we do a really good job of hiding ourselves from other people, don't we? That we don't want them to realize our vulnerabilities. We want to project that we're large and in charge, that we're confident, that we're knowing. Sometimes you know we study really hard, and so that we can never feel like we don't know the answers. But the truth is, there are so many things about life that we really don't know. There are so many things that are beyond our ability to control. And what happens when some of those all of a sudden become pretty obvious? It 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 upsets your whole life, doesn't it? You want to bring it back into control when circumstances that were beyond your control seem now to be driving, and you're going along for the ride. Yeah, it's not a really good feeling. I don't know about you, but there have been times in my life when I have felt that kind of being out of control. Um, I remember just in my own pastoral, career, I pastored a church, and and I was an assistant, and I went to work with a man who was influential in me going away to seminary. And I was there. I started back in 1982, and got married in May. And so we went on our honeymoon, came home, started this work in June of '82. In October, Cindy became pregnant, and she had developed toxemia really badly. So her blood pressure was like 230 over 130. Um, it was a new work. The church was, you know, uh, going out, in faith, just because I was there to help them to build their college and career, to work with this young students. And I felt like the area was great, and we were going to be able to really do a good work there. So my wife, who, as great as she is, she was like, "Okay, we'll take this chance." And they were paying me $200 a week, which was not a lot of money. Part of it was that we thought, well, we could do this because Cindy was a nurse. She'd be able to work a little bit, augment my income. But the church made it clear that as the church would grow, they would take care of me. And so I saw this just as a short-term thing, but I was determined to work hard and make this grow. Well, with Cindy, um, we were living in Staten Island, New York at this time, and she didn't have reciprocity. She had her license in New Jersey and Philadelphia, and so she needed to apply for reciprocity. And by the time all that paperwork came around, she wound up getting pregnant, and then she was too sick to even consider about working. As I said, her blood pressure was like 230 over 130. So here we are, man. This is really tough times now. I'm trying to make something go, and we had a place to stay, but as far as disposable income, I was only making, like I said, $200 a week. And then on top of that, in November, her father came down with terminal lung cancer, and so that Cindy's dad was a big man. He was like 6'5", just a couple of 100 pounds. He was a big guy. Loved the outdoors. He was Mr. Fix It. He could fix anything. And to see him go down to about 160 pounds, it was very difficult to watch. But the worst thing was yet to come. So in October she's pregnant. In November we find out her father's dying, and then in January of that year, of the following year, right, I wound up confronting the pastor of the church because I found out that he was sleeping with his daughter, and I confronted him, and he resigned that day, and the church, man, just exploded. If you've ever seen these programs where they show you a building being demolished and how it just like caves in on itself, you can imagine when this news came out how it affected the church. People could not believe it, that someone that they had looked up to and respected had violated that trust. There were some so angry they would not come back, and others who were still seeing that that there was a work to do, and it was just horrible. And I remember sitting there thinking, this is not good. And then I realized, like, Jesus didn't really disappoint me. It was all these circumstances. This is why I'm looking to one who, it says, searches me and knows me, and he's familiar with all of my ways, right? That everything that we do, or everything that we think about, everything that we say, God is always in charge of that, and He knows it. He knows it all. So I love this passage. It says here, it says, "You're before me and you're behind me," right? Before a word is on my tongue, you know it completely. Look at verse 3. You're familiar with all my ways. So there were many days that I would just get up and I would think, what am I going to do? This is so beyond anything that they ever prepared me for in seminary. My wife is sick. My father-in-law is dying, and the church is imploding. And yet, I found a great deal of comfort in knowing that none of this was happening beyond God's purview, and that maybe this was God's way now of teaching me things that would make me stronger. Like he says, that trials are meant into our life not to overwhelm me, but to teach me. And I learned early on that that He is dependable, that I can bring all of my troubles to Him. And if I wait, and if I do what He's asking me to do, He will show a way. In the midst of the darkness, all of a sudden a light will shine and lead me in a direction I am to go. And I can tell you from personal experience, God has done that numerous times in my life. And perhaps there are many of you right now who, listening to my story, can tell a story of your own. But it has to come from a place where we gain comfort in knowing. In fact, isn't that what the Samaritan woman said, going back to the story of the Samaritan woman in John chapter 4? When she left and her eyes were open now to see that Jesus was the Messiah, she went back and told all her friends, says, come and meet the man who told me everything I ever did. See, it was this revelation that Jesus really knew her, and that His desire for her was for her to succeed, for her to thrive, for her to experience this eternal life. Well, my friends, that's what our faith should be doing for us. Every day we get up, despite the problems, despite the brokenness in the world, we recognize that He goes before me and He is behind me. There is not a thought that comes into my head that He is not aware of, that He will never leave me or forsake me. Well, I think this week is going to be a really good study. I think there's going to be a lot of practical value in taking a look at Psalm 139 and its themes. And I hope that you'll join me and share that with your friends, that they come together for a brief moment in the morning and just set our hearts and minds on things above, so that we go out seizing the day and never forgetting that God is good all the time. Well, it's really a pleasure to be back. I'm glad for the discipline of just doing this on a daily basis. And I trust, Lord willing, that we'll spend more time again tomorrow. So till then, seize the day, my friends. God bless you. And looking forward to the week.